Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Big Boss said I'm not qualified to do my job. Some backstory. I got hired as an administrative assistant to the CIO, Chief Information Officer, in the IT department of a small bank. At that time the job description was partly administrative for the CIO, and they also wanted me assist Bob, who oversaw the mainframe and daily processing. It's a small bank and they didn't have the funds for two positions, so they just smashed them together. I had already worked there in another department and that's how I got the job. I didn't have a ton of administrative work for the CIO as he didn't like to delegate much. Bob, however, would regularly have me help him by dealing with vendors to fix stuff or to have them do maintenance on the mainframe or related servers. I basically babysat the vendor while they worked on my computer, accessing applications and servers, answering any questions and gaining them access to things they needed. Also making sure they didn't accidentally fudge anything up. I was basically doing IT stuff and not getting paid as IT. Like a friggin' clown. I should also mention I was the only girl in the department and definitely got paid less than the IT guys. They regularly joked about how I wasn't real IT because I was technically an administrative assistant according to my job title. I did this for about 5 years. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm not a dummy and picked this stuff up easy, which is probably why Bob had me help him so much. Bob also liked to take naps in his office, so that may be part of the reason too. One day our applications guy came up to my desk, which sat outside the CIO and Bob's offices, and asked if I would babysit a vendor on one of his servers because he had to leave unexpectedly. I told him of course. While I was getting the specifics from him, the CIO comes running out of his office to say no, he didn't want me babysitting vendors. He said I didn't have the right IT training or qualifications to deal with a vendor alone on our servers. Applications guy and Bob, both knowing that I literally did this all the time, did not say a peep in my defense. Did not tell the CIO I'm qualified as I've been trained and have been doing this for 5 years. Bob just said he'd take care of it. This really upsets me. I went home and started looking for a new job the same day. Cue malicious compliance. I told myself I would never work with a vendor again no matter what. Wouldn't you know it, one of our main applications connected to our mainframe went down a few days later when all the IT managers, including Bob and applications guy, were at an off-site managers meeting in the next town over. No one else in the department knew anything about this application or how to fix it. I of course could have called the vendor myself, but I'm not qualified. As the help desk queue was filling up with people calling in to say they couldn't work because this application was down, I informed the help desk manager he needed call Bob and have him leave his meeting so he could fix the problem. When Bob finally got back to his office, I said, "Sorry, wish I was qualified enough to help," and went to lunch. Bob never asked me to do anything with a vendor again, and I left the department a few months later. Got a job not in IT that paid more, and my boss respects me. Next one is titled, Can't reschedule pest control without a fee? Okay, the exterminator will do it instead. Years ago, when I was 20-something-year-old man, I moved into an apartment with my best friend, but we were both slackers working dead-end jobs that didn't pay well. Because of this, we could only afford an apartment in one of the worst parts of the city. Massive crime rates, murder, burglary, etc., and terrible police response times were already a concern for us, but this was exacerbated by the fact that we were two of the only white people for miles. We kept to ourselves, didn't cause any problems with tenants or management, and tried to solve most of our problems relating to our unit on our own, mostly because we didn't want to be just another victim of the rampant crime. But the roach infestation in that place was intense. We put down so much poison that I'm shocked we didn't make the unit uninhabitable for humans, but the roaches didn't even seem to notice, so we decided that we'd have to request pest control from management. They had a pest control company that came by every couple weeks, but you had to request your unit be placed on the list. Management didn't have any problems getting us put on the list, but the poison they used was so strong that we wouldn't be able to enter the apartment for 2 hours after it was treated. They even stressed numerous times that pets must be removed for that time as well. We didn't have any pets, and if we did, the poison we put down ourselves likely would have killed them already. We told them we understood and were put on the list for sometime between 11 AM and 4 PM. This was perfect, as even if he came at 4 PM, 2 hours would have passed by time we got off work, 6 PM, and drove home. The day comes, and when I get home I see the exterminator is still there and there is no notice in our unit that it had been treated. So I went to speak with the exterminator and he said he hasn't gotten to it yet. I point out that he was supposed to be finished hours ago, and was told, it's not my problem. Take it up with management. Now, my roommate and I just got off work and didn't want to have to leave again for another 2 hours. So I asked management if we could reschedule and was told that there would be a fee for rescheduling since we asked to be on list. I flatly refused to pay a fee as he was supposed to be finished hours ago, but they don't budge, so I go back to my apartment and tell my buddy my plan. If we can't reschedule without paying, then we'll just need the exterminator to do it instead. When we get the knock on our door, I tell my roommate to go in his room unless he wants to see way more of me than he ever needed to. I strip down, completely naked, and answer the door. He surely recognizes me, even sans clothes, and is desperately maintaining eye contact. I let him suffer the uncomfortable situation for a few seconds before saying, sorry man, I thought you were going to be done hours ago. After 6 is my naked lounge time, but come on in and do whatever you need to, and open the door to grant him passage. He quickly reminded me that we couldn't be here for the next 2 hours, but I said I just wanted to make sure he got all the areas where we keep finding roaches. He quickly decided that he would rather not spend any more time around a naked man and said he'd just reschedule for tomorrow instead and left. Now, this whole thing was even more uncomfortable for me. I mean, I'm the one in my birthday suit, but I wasn't going to back down. Had he decided to just go ahead and treat my unit regardless of my state of dress, I had already planned to do stretches while standing nearby directing him where we needed the poison most, but it thankfully didn't come to that. We never heard anything about it from management, and I get the feeling the exterminator didn't relay my antics to them, probably not wanting to relive it, and our unit was treated the next day. My roommate said he thought I was bluffing and wouldn't actually do it, but I wasn't going to pay for someone else's mistake. Next one is titled, Take Suspicious Persons to the Front Desk If They're Not Wearing a Name Badge. You bet, the party is on. This happened in the mid-90s when I was working for a software company. Said software company was a major provider of logistic management software for the trucking and shipping industry at the time. They were founded by 2 computer science college students in the 60s who were able to build the company into a multi-million-dollar company. Both gentlemen were wonderful to work with and were still there when I started working for the company. One took the sales side and managed the sales, marketing efforts, the other managed the software development teams. Together, they'd created a juggernaut of a software company. The gentleman who managed the software development team's official title was CEO, retired after putting in 25 years. We gave him a heartfelt send-off, with many of us being in tears at his departure. That's how much we loved him. They hired a new CEO who didn't come from a software development background. Huge red flag, he didn't understand the software development cycle. New CEO also regularly treated people poorly, insulting them in meetings, in front of their co-workers, berating them, setting unreasonable deadlines without consulting with the people who actually did the work to see if said deadline was even attainable. That's not how you motivate software developers who have high levels of skill and experience. All the developers needed to do is reach out to a headhunter, slang term for employment recruiter, say, I have X years of experience with major logistic management software company, in order to get a better job with more money. Suffice it to say, I wasn't impressed. After experiencing the setting unreasonable deadlines issue in my project, which resulted in me calling our customers behind his back in order to negotiate a reasonable deadline, something I was successful in doing that he never found out about, I was looking for ways to pay back. New CEO started talking about how unsecure our facility was and how we were in need of a new entrance security system in order to reduce the risk of corporate espionage. We all figured he meant a mag key card with a gate. Something state-of-the-art for entrance security. But no, he was cheap. His idea of state-of-the-art security was giving us name badges. That's it. Not even a photo ID, just a badge with our names on it. We were to wear them so that they were visible. He sent out an email stating that if we saw anyone throughout our campus without a name badge after a specific date, we were to treat them like they were a suspicious person. When we found someone without a name badge, we were to immediately escort them to the front desk. New CEO and high-level management had their offices in the front desk area. This is important later in this story. Trouble is the entire rollout of the name badges was delayed due to production issues. Said deadline date came and went, about 1/3 of our employees didn't have a name badge yet. The new CEO had also not rescinded his original email order regarding taking suspicious persons without a name badge to the front desk. Cue malicious compliance. After that deadline, I was walking to the snack area and met one of the software development managers without a name badge. I initially made the joke, "Hey, Dave, you look like a suspicious person." We both laughed a bit. He commented on how half-assed the whole name badge thing was, and started walking back to his area of the campus. I was suddenly struck by an idea. I went back to him and said, "Hey, Dave, you really are a suspicious person. I need to take you to the front office." At first, he balked. "No, really. I don't have time for this. I need to get back to work." I whispered, "Hey, Dave, listen to me for a sec. Envision this, I take you to the front desk. You go into the lounge there. Take a smoke break. We had lounges for smokers and non-smokers. Drink a Coke, watch some TV, and all on company time. Heaven only knows how long you'll be there before someone notices you're gone, could be hours, getting paid for doing nothing on company time." Dave's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "You're right," he replied. "I guess I am a suspicious person. You'd better escort me to the front office." So he reached out his arm to me, and arm in arm, we both walked to the front office where I left Dave to take a well-deserved extended break on company time. Dave was the perfect first person for me to do this with, because he was one of the software development managers. As I came across others without name badges, insisting that I needed to escort them to the front office, I told them, "This a gag against the CEO. Dave's in on it. He's already there in the smoking lounge." As soon as others heard that Dave was in on the gag, they willingly complied and followed me to the front desk. I didn't stop until I'd hunted down about 50 coworkers and taken them to the front desk. We had a staff of around 250 employees. By the time I'd dropped off my last person, it was quite the party atmosphere in the front desk area. People laughing, joking, drinking soft drinks and eating snacks. It was getting really loud. I looked at this jolly scene and thought, my work here is done, and went back to my desk. 1 hour goes by. Finally, the new CEO emerges from his office after hearing nearly 2 hours of this cacophony, angrily asking, "What on earth are all of you doing here? Why aren't you working?" They all replied. Bill Evans' Trio fan said that we were suspicious persons because we didn't have our name badges, so she brought us here. New CEO apparently got flustered and said, "Well, go back to work." Crowd disperses. Sitting at my desk, I get a phone call from new CEO, Bill Evans' Trio fan. "Come to my office right now." Off I went to his office, taking a printed copy of his original email directive regarding people without name badges with me. I sat down in front of his desk and new CEO, looking extremely irritated, asked, "What do you think you're doing?" I calmly replied, "I'm following your orders, sir," and handed him the email of his original name badge directives. In reading his own email, he immediately realized he couldn't do anything against me. He got even more flustered and sputtered, "Well, stop following my orders." I again calmly replied, "Sir, may I remind you that you ordered me to not follow your orders at a time that is most convenient for me to do so?" His face looked like he was in brain lock and that he didn't know how to respond. Well, no. Go back to work." I experienced no repercussions from that incident. There were other orchestrated incidents that followed, but they were behind-the-scenes practical jokes, not malicious compliance. I left a year later for greener work pastures. About 6 months after I left, the new CEO was forced to retire under threat of dismissal. Next one is titled, "You're Late Even Though You're Early." This happened many years ago when I was 15. I worked at a Holiday Inn as a prep cook. This Holiday Inn was one of the larger and nicer ones. It had a fully equipped restaurant open all day. The chef was an older, approximately 50 to 60-ish, grey hair and beard, European man. He had a fairly heavy accent. I started work at 6 a.m. on Saturdays and Sundays and was always on time. My father would always drive me to work on these days. This was one of my first jobs and was afraid of screwing anything up, so I always showed up early enough to change and sit for a 10-minute coffee before starting. The change rooms were just a flight of stairs below the kitchen and they kept the uniforms stocked on shelves in there. This particular morning I got there at the same time I always did. I went to the change room but found no uniforms. I asked the chef where I could find uniforms and he advised me to go to the laundry facilities and grab some clean ones, not just for me but a cart full to bring back. As I mentioned in the beginning, this was a large hotel. It took me a full 15 minutes to go to the laundry and come back with the uniforms. After changing I had no time to sit for a coffee, so I went right into the kitchen to start my shift. I approached the chef to ask what we're working on that morning, but before I could he asked me, "What time is it?" I replied, "It's 6 o'clock. He said, "No it's not, it's 6:05. You're late. Get out of my kitchen and come back to start at 6:30. He knew I had to go to the laundry for uniforms and I tried to say something about it. He just said, "This is my kitchen and there are no excuses for being late. Get out and come back at 6:30 and you'll be docked the half hour." Needless to say, I left the kitchen and came back to start at 6:30. From that day forward I had to make sure I added 15 minutes to my arrival time in the event I had to get uniforms again, which did happen again. I made sure I got there early enough to have my coffee even with a trip to the laundry. One of these days I got there at my usual arrival time. I put on my uniform and was making my way through the kitchen to the restaurant to have my coffee before my shift. As I passed through the kitchen the chef saw me and asked me to get him some carrots from the walk-in cooler. I asked him, "Chef, what time is it?" He says, "It's 6 o'clock. I said, "No, it's 5:45. I don't start for another 15 minutes. Well, he just lost it. He started cursing me out and even threw a plate, not directly at me but it did shatter when it hit the floor. "You don't talk to me like that, you stupid little idiot. This is my kitchen, you do what I say. Get the duck out, you're fired." I guess I must have been holding on to some anger as I didn't even think about my reply to him. It just came out. My father came to pick me up and we spoke with someone in charge. The fact I was 15 years old and he threw a dish didn't bode well for him. We found out this isn't the first time he's thrown dishes in the kitchen like that. He was fired a couple of weeks later. Last one is titled, "Sometimes trying to avoid paying for something will come back to bite you." I work at a large university with many colleges and departments. I had become sort of a de facto building manager for 2 of the buildings that my department had labs in just because I knew where everything was. One of the buildings was shared between 3 or 4 different departments. We moved in when the building was built, about 15 years ago. All of the departments had labs of some sort, but not all of them were wet labs with sinks, chemicals, analytical apparatus, etc. Ours originally had the most web labs, another was mostly computer equipment, and the other was mostly structural models and stuff. One of building amenities was a centralized source of deionized dye water. Dye water is used in many analyses where the water must be very non-reactive and non-conductive. An outside company maintained and swapped out the resin exchange tanks that processed the water. Because our department used about 90% of the dye water, we paid for the maintenance of the system, which probably ran a couple $1,000s a year. It wouldn't have been worth it to try to transfer $100 to $200 per year from the departments, and we had no issue with this. However, maintenance is important, because if untreated water is used in systems needing dye water, it can invalidate experiments and foul filters that can cost $500 and up. Fast forward 10 years. Some of our labs have moved to a different building, and another department, medical research related, moves into those labs. I don't know specifically what research they are doing, but there's a good probability that they are using dye water in the labs. Dye usage goes up about 1/3 to 1/2 after they move in. I mentioned to our fiscal staff that we ought to try to get them to share maintenance costs, but no one pursues it. Fast forward another 2 to 3 years. Due to some internal politics and some mechanical failures, the hood ducts were corroded out. Our remaining labs were set to move to a remodeled building elsewhere on campus. About 1.5 years before the move-out date, the remodeling took a long time. I contact the other department's chairman and tell him that we will be leaving, so someone needs to take over the maintenance of the DI system, and that since our contract was due for renewal, this would be a good time to do it. He refers me to their fiscal head, who, in no uncertain terms, tells me, "We're not interested." I try to impress upon him that we are not going to maintain a system in a building we are not even in, but he pays no attention. I mention this to our fiscal staff, but again, they don't pursue it. I try to contact them again 6 months before moving out. This time I push harder, but again the chair defers to the fiscal head, who assures me that they do not use any DI water in their labs, and they won't be taking it over or paying anything. I try to argue, but he's completely uninterested. What I haven't mentioned is that we were forced to move out by the college, so they were paying for the remodel in the other building. They continually underestimated the costs of the remodel. Just before our labs were going to move over there, they realized they hadn't costed in a new DI system. The quote from the DI company was about $10,000 to install a new system, and the college was already continually whining about cost overruns. I suddenly get an epiphany. If I could have grown a handlebar mustache, I would have twirled it. I asked the DI company, "Can we just move the existing system over to the new building?" They basically say, "Sure, no problem, that wouldn't be much more than a normal service call." Our staff is skeptical, but I show them my past emails where the other department had emphatically said they didn't use it. So, it's a go. The day comes, and they move the system over, surprisingly easily. I sit back, chuckling to myself, trying to figure out how long it'll be until we hear something. A week? 2 weeks? A month? I have no idea how often they use DI water. Well, I was wrong. I got an email the next day. A researcher from the other department contacts me over email. I didn't know any of their staff, and says he was told to ask me if there was a problem with the DI water in the building. I innocently explained to him that the system was moved. He blows up. "That system is part of the building, you can't take it." I ask him if he had ever contributed to the maintenance of the system. He says no, that we had never asked. I send him all the previous correspondence where I had asked both his chair and fiscal head to take it over, and their claim that they didn't use it. "But they didn't ask me," he says. At this point I shrug and say, "I'm sorry, but you'll need to speak to your chair about that." I was laughing so hard after that conversation, the lady in the next office came over to ask me if I was okay. I have never had such a pure sense of schadenfreude. Could we have moved the DI system back to the original building? Probably, but duck that, I gave them every chance to do the right thing, and they were greedy little bastards about it. Suck on them apples. Thanks for listening.